Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to yet another edition of the Pure Digital Passion Podcast with me, Moses Kemibaro. My guest once again is Tito Alai. This is the second part of a conversation that we started. And unfortunately, we ran out of time, which was really interesting because Tito had so much to share. And we only just got to the point when he had just started his career at Africa Online, which is, of course, the internet service provider that operated, I believe, in more than 12 African markets at some point. And that is actually where I started my career. But more importantly, he joined Africa Online from the time when he had been at Unilever. And we sort of pick it up from that point onwards, where hopefully he'll give us a bit more color and perspective around the years when he was there. And of course, segueing into his time at other organizations like Kodak, Celtel and Zain and other technology and telco focused businesses. So thank you very much for joining us again, Tito.
Thanks so much, Moses. It's a pleasure to be here again.
Yeah.
To carry on with this running around the.
And you are the first guest I've had who actually managed to get us beyond the 1 hour mark in that way. So clearly there's a lot to unpack here.
There's a lot. We've been around the block quite a few times at full speed. So, so anyway.
So coming back to where we were in part one, I think we had just sort of gotten to the point where we're seeing how you transitioned from Unilever. I think you mentioned that a former peer of yours at African Lakes, joined African Lakes, you were seeing that maybe Unilever wasn't going to be the place for you going forward. And I guess there was a request. The headhunters came along and reached out to you and said, why don't you come and join us? So maybe we can just pick it up from there and tell us a little bit about how that comes to be and, of course, how we move on from there with Africa Online.
Yeah. So I came to my 10th anniversary at Unilever, as I was saying. And this wasn't a peer of mine, actually. The guy who moved to African Lakes to run African Lakes PLC had been chairman of Unilever Malawi.
Okay.
Then took over from Joe and Jui as chairman of Unilever East Africa or East Africa Industry at that time.
So he'd actually had some time on the ground in East Africa.
So he did that, and we overlapped with him. I think I don't know if it even amounted to a year before I was expatriated to London. But
what was his name, if I may ask?
His name was Chris Foy.
Chris Foy. I'm trying to remember if I can remember that name, but then just continue.
Yeah, so it was Chris Foy, and Chris Foy then moved on to African Lakes PLC, and I think it was before they then acquired, together with IEC, acquired Africa Online back from Carlos Slim, who had bought it from Prodigy. And so I got headhunted to join them to set up, kind of that very important transition from, kind of startup, moving into now formalizing things, turning into a scale business. So that was really part of my role, to scale up, to now grow through, processes and structures and all this boring stuff that we do in corporate life. While when you're a startup, it really depends on the individuals and all that sort of stuff. So you want to make it really sustainable, so that you can scale across the whole continent. And that was the mission at that time, which remains the mission today. It was bridging, all this jargon we have, bridging the digital divide. So we wanted to bridge the digital divide. We are still trying to bridge the digital divide. But to get under the leadership of IEC, that was the mission, bridging the digital divide between Africa and the rest of the world. And I think people like IEC get under-recognized.
For that piece of history,
Yeah, because in reality, some of these really iconic people don't bang their own chests, because in Africa it's not seen as the thing to do. But really played a significant role.
So I'm going to throw this question back to you again, and I don't know that we sort of touched on this in more detail, because you're coming from this sort of, international, global FMCG business, you have sterling credentials. You're now coming into a startup environment, possibly a space that maybe you don't understand very well, of course, but you do understand marketing. and now you're moving to the world of technology and internet and telecom, so to speak. We know that also at that point in time, African Lakes, until that point before acquiring Africa Online, had essentially been a business in more traditional areas or industries. I know that there were things in, I think they were in plantations doing sugar, they were doing Toyota sales, I think even people like Londro in Kenya, they were doing kind of like more old school business, industrial distribution, manufacturing. And I'm just wondering, when you think about that switch, it seems quite dramatic or radical to me. But I'm just wondering, what was going through your mind at that point, and what appealed to you about this particular moment? What was there that sort of said to you, Tito, you need to do this?
Yeah, I think at that time, and especially if you're young, and I'd encourage, guys who are younger than us, that at that stage, you don't have a lot to lose, per se. And what I'm thankful for is that I was very, very keen on learning, as we used to term it, maintaining a steep learning curve. You want to learn as much as you can. And part of the reason I thought it was a good time to leave Unilever is that I had learned a lot. I'd learned a great deal from the best, if not one of the best companies in the world. I'd learned how to operate at a local environment, at a tactical level. I had learned how to operate at a regional level in Latin America, India, that sort of place, kind of strategic level, regionally speaking. And I had moved on to a worldwide strategic role. And all of these involved mega transitions because, as you know, an operating environment and a strategic environment are totally different.
Yeah.
And so I was very grateful for that. And then from let's say, an industry or a sector point of view, it seemed to make sense to me to say that I had learned as much as I could at a consumer goods level. And even then, Unilever provided the opportunity to move around. So I'd moved from, say, sales, where I was selling everything, the whole portfolio. Then I moved to managing brands or brand groups in foods. I did household cleaning, detergents and soaps. Then I ended up in personal care, so ranging from hair care to dental care to all that sort of stuff, moving around. So I'd done all that. And again, the other diversity was leaving your home country because you can become a big fish in a small pond or a small lake. And then moving around the world, seeing what the world has to offer at a very young stage where your mind is very plastic. So you're very culturally adaptable. You are more ready to turn up at a place and say, I've just come to observe how this place is, instead of coming when you're at a stage where you believe you have all the answers and you're coming to say, this thing is not like what I know.
You're soaking
You
it all
should
in.
do this. So I learned a great deal. Now, to your question, which is, so you move from consumer goods straight into technology, and it's not, a kind of established technology. The internet was new.
And the nature of the company you're joining is also very new.
This is also a startup. I've not worked for a startup before.
Yes.
I had run my workshop in Muhoroni. I was welding,
so you understood
welding
the
trailers and all that. Yeah, that if that can be called a startup, it was.
Yeah.
But it was a big kind of transition. So I have to say, it's back to the theme of maintaining a lifelong love for learning new things, which I'm still into that kind of stuff. I'm still doing new things, trying to learn new things, trying to grapple with new technology and stuff like that. But at that point in time, I said, if I'm leaving Unilever to learn,
yes,
then I better follow through, in the sense that let me not go back into an FMCG company because I'll be learning, you'll be teaching a young dog new tricks, kind of, right? But if I'm leaving Unilever to go into something radically different, then for sure I've got a lot to learn, right? And so it was with that kind of attitude.
I know, see.
Yeah. And then it was a learning, as you rightly say, I'm joining, I've been kind of steered that way by African Lakes PLC, which was an old conglomerate, from the British Empire days. that had been running tea plantations and all sorts of hotels. It was kind of the equivalent would probably be Londro
Yeah.
for a
Yeah.
Kenyan audience. So you'd
Correct.
recognize that sort of thing. So with the fingers stuck into all sorts of pies, distributorships for Land Rover and heavy earth-moving equipment, that sort of thing. Big in Southern Africa, kind of Zimbabwe, Malawi, those sorts of areas. And now, through an injection of a fresh vision with Chris Foy and all those sorts of guys, they realized that where the action was in the dot-com segment.
And that's when the dot-com moment was booming,
Was just starting.
Yeah.
So they acquired, and I think it coincided, Aisi can speak for himself, but it coincided with this time when Carlos Slim, the richest guy in the world at that time, I believe, had bought Africa Online, or Prodigy had bought Africa Online.
Correct.
They had put together, they had a global vision, they had China Online going on, they had whatever in the States. But this organization from Mexico bought them. And for them, Africa sounded very far away. China sounded even further away. So they were seeking to divest. And
These portions of the business, yeah.
And Aisi and his, and his team thought, well, we better go back in and buy it back and run with it because it has not reached the, it hadn't achieved whatever they had in mind. And that's when I think they went hand in hand with African Lakes, who provided a significant chunk of the capital to buy it off the Carlos's organization. So that's what I remember. And then at that point, I joined then.
Okay.
So there's a learning curve for African Lakes. There's a learning curve for me. There's a learning curve for Africa Online because we are saying we want to now scale up. We want to be Pan-African, really. And we want to go into this fast growth area. So that's where I came.
What did you bring to Africa Online that they did not have? What do you see that you brought to them that they didn't have at the time?
I think it was just this. I brought a great understanding of consumers, as we call them, or human beings. Let's put it that way.
Okay, yeah.
Because all these are just labels of the same people.
Yeah.
So this is how do you present your offer to a large chunk of the population, basically, across broad swathes of geography. And with all this diversity and all that, how do you cut through all that stuff to present something that is compelling for people across different countries, different income groups, different, social outlooks, different cultural things? So those are things that I brought as part of my toolkit. And then there was all these organizational things, which when you're in a really an organization like Unilever that is so well structured, well organized, a deep well of culture from an internal culture point of view, it gives you a certain perspective on how to get things done. Not necessarily through direct authority where you're kicking people around, but through the strength of how persuasive are you with the ideas that you're bringing, because you have to carry the whole organization along. You have to carry your peers along, the leadership along, so that and then your employees really, who have to buy into some compelling brand proposition, even internally. I was moving from a manufacturing organization to an organization that was not putting together boxes and tubes and all sorts of things and then putting them on supermarket shelves. It was a totally different beast. So this is a technology business. It's service driven, and the product is really it's ephemeral. Yeah. And that's another bit of the learning curve, which I really enjoyed. And so so I just brought that appreciation, turning the whole thing, simplifying everything, because what I've discovered with technical colleagues is that we speak amongst ourselves. What we are speaking about really makes sense to us within the organization. And then we go out to the market and we offer what to us are solutions. Yet a customer is asking, okay, so you've brought me this thing you're calling a solution, but what's the problem? Yeah?
What are you solving for?
Yeah, you're saying it's a solution. It means there must be a problem. And I don't perceive that I necessarily have a problem. Why are you calling it a solution? So there's a lot of language that we just take for granted, and we don't really put ourselves on the other side and say, can I really understand what these guys are talking about? So there are some of those things that we could bring, especially in the African environment, where we are kind of, we have to explain. Part of market growth is this is a new thing, so you can't say I'm comparing with somebody else. You have to introduce the whole concept of the internet and what role does it play.
And this is when, of course, the internet itself was not well understood.
Because it wasn't there.
Yeah.
In
the early
for the
days,
whole world, it wasn't there.
Yeah.
So, how are you going to sell something that doesn't exist in people's daily lives? So you have to define it in terms that they can understand. You have to, as I say, show what need it is meeting, and put it in a language that can be easily assimilated locally, everywhere we are. So, Cote d'Ivoire, Francophone, no problem. When we go to places like Swaziland and all those sorts of places, we had to put it in a way
and
that
unify
cuts
it.
across.
Huh?
And then unify it, because you're not going to start reinventing Africa Online in 10 different places just because you're saying we have to be local. Yeah. So all that stuff, a lot of it are things that maybe you just pick up because there's this notion of operating globally, but being local at the same time.
Correct.
In terms of your touch points and it's quite a subtle kind of skill to have. And that thank God we were very successful at Africa Online with some of this stuff.
There's some things I want to highlight that I think are really important because, as you know, you and I were there at the same time. But as we like to say in Kenya, I was core ground. You were in the apex part of the organization, leading strategy and so forth around marketing. And I think there are two things that were instructive around that period for me. And I think kind of like when I started to understand even how marketing and branding worked, because I remember until then, even the way we did, say, documentation or even our PowerPoint decks, how we marketing collaterals. You'd look at what the Tanzanian guys are doing, the guys in Ghana, the guys in Cote d'Ivoire, everything was different.
Yeah.
And it only become apparent when you had sort of like these, inter-country meetings, guys flying to Nairobi and kind of like, the sales teams as I was. And there was no consistency. And I think that was one of the things you probably found immediately.
Yeah.
The other things that I think were instructive around that period of time is there's this massive campaign that was launched, which was, I think, My World, My Internet, was it?
Yes, it was. Wow.
I
remember that campaign.
Yeah. You were part of that.
Yeah.
You were
I conceived
that,
of it. I was. Those are the things I was using. Those are the techniques to have a cohesive, internal drive. Translate this vision that the founders had, that Aisi probably had, but translating it into something that compels everybody to, kind of converge. And then also put it out into the market.
And this preceded the IPO, isn't it? This is just before. So I think so even before the IPO, what I get is this sort of.
It was my world, my provider.
My provider, yes, that is what it was. And then there was this sort of, I think, consistency of communication, singular message across the markets.
Correct.
And then the branding and even our collaterals all became seamless.
Yeah.
And then I think the whole idea was that as we present ourselves to the world, we need to be one thing, whichever language or region we are in the continent. And then now it becomes more pragmatic or practical to not have an IPO because everything has been sort of harmonized and synchronized, as it were, into one singular thing.
Absolutely.
Maybe you can talk a little bit about that process before we move to the next thing. And then, of course, the IPO,
Yeah, it is something that, let me not go into too much depth because there's a lot that we've got to do. And it was a long time ago, right?
Yeah. But just the highlights,
But suffice to say, you have to have a big idea. really. And if you're raising funds in the London Stock Exchange and all that sort of stuff, which Easy was doing together with the team, is we have to have a compelling narrative. Something that enables the investor to find it meaningful. And this has occurred quite a few times in my career, because you bear in mind that if these very solid analytical, investors are in the room and they're in the city of London, when you mention the word Africa, what triggers them is that it represents risk, right?
In the dark continent.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
As it were.
I didn't want to go there, but you're right. Because everything that they're consuming at home on CNN and BBC is just war and famine and all these disaster and death and everything. And here you come saying, wow, guys, I've come with a great proposition for you to invest in.
Yeah.
And no matter how good the numbers look, that thing is at a subliminal level, at the back of their minds. You say, but it's Africa, This place is risky. Okay? So a lot of times, what I found, especially with fundraising roadshows, of which I have not, in the Africa Online days, I was not part of the roadshow crew. I was just putting together narrative and harmonizing the thing so it really looks, compelling. But I've been in rooms, maybe later on, let's say the Celtel exercise, when we went to do some fundraising things.
Yes.
Where diving straight into your PowerPoints and your Excel sheets and your graphs just doesn't move the needle. Because the steeper your curve, the more guys are saying, wow, this kind of returns, they look good. But you know what? They must be very risky. And so you have to front load that narrative with the true story of Africa, which what I say is the true story of Africa, which is the good side of things, which never gets communicated, right? For various reasons. And I've found that that's the most effective way. If you want to raise funds, then you've got to first of all explain why. We always rush to the what you're doing. That's what you wanted to say. And the how you're going to do it. The most important thing is the why. Why are you doing what you're doing? Why is the organization running around doing what they're doing? And that is what I've been trying to bring to the fore throughout my career.
Fantastic. So you have some time at Africa Online. Would like to talk a little bit about how that comes to an end and then what comes next.
Well, with Africa Online, there was a lot of change going on. First of all, we got matters out of our hands was the .com bust.
Yes.
Came along.
Right about then, huh?
Yeah. And I think that became very challenging. Yeah. I left at a time when all these things were going on. There was a lot of how would I put it? It was in flux, yeah. And the .com thing had hammered Africa Online, and also my family circumstances were my daughter had been just born. I was flying from place to place, back home over the weekend in London. Head office in Nairobi, operating companies where I needed to go and, share the vision, as you're saying, and make sure things are streamlined. So I'm flying all over the place. And I found that it was becoming untenable. So I left and I joined Kodak, at their regional head office in London. And my first job was directing the brand across Africa, Middle East, the Balkans, and so my job was a
global role again, yeah.
Yeah, back to where I'd come from in Unilever. So I had the region which was Central Europe, Middle East, and Africa, running the Kodak brand.
Wow. Is it the consumer level, the professional printing?
No. It was the way Kodak was organized there was consumer imaging, as they call it.
Okay.
Then you had the professional.
Okay.
And then you had the other stuff like medical imaging and all that
Okay.
stuff. So because the brand really was a consumer thing, so I was responsible for consumer.
Okay.
Yeah, they called it consumer imaging.
Okay.
Yeah. So I did that. And then because of the encroachment of digital upon Kodak, which our worldwide office in Rochester, New York, were not as alive to as the European business. So the European business felt that this wave of digital was coming and something needed to be done about it. I remember being called into the office in Geneva, and they asked me, they said, Tito, you're in a database called the Gold Database. I said, what the hell is it? It was a database of the people that they considered had high potential within the organization. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think I was in that database. But they said, look, we've been looking through your career profile, and it looks like you're a real growth champion. Yeah. Everywhere you go, it's growth, growth, growth. But now, so I said, yeah, for me, that's the thing. And so they said, but what would you say if, because we've noticed that where you've had all this growth, it's all been emerging markets, fast growing, So what would you say if we moved you into a mature, developed, slow growing market? What would you do? So I said, I have to grow no matter what. So God help my competitors. Because if I can't grow, if I can't grow through market growth and increase of penetration, then I have to grow at the expense of my customers. I have to grow through market share. So that's what I would do. I thought it was an abstract, kind of philosophical conversation. I did not know it was actually an interview.
Oh.
Because what then happened is they lumped their biggest category on me, which was consumer film,
Wow.
from a pan-European point of view.
Wow.
So having come from Kirinyaga, Muhoroni, and all that stuff, here I was responsible for a huge pan-European portfolio for Eastman Kodak. So I did that until, Mo Ibrahim and what was then called Mobile Systems International came calling, and I eventually decided to join them.
Okay, so now I want us to get into the details of this because maybe for the context of our audience, who's
Yeah.
Mo Ibrahim? What is his
Yes.
business? What does it precede? And then again, for me, the question becomes: you had Kodak, of course. Many of our younger audience probably don't even know that name.
Okay. Yes, you're right.
Because digital cameras and phones with cameras completely blew that apart.
Yeah.
But tell us a little bit about that because I think that's instructive around the whole telco scene that Africa has today. Who was more Ibrahim, or who is he rather,
Yeah.
and what was he trying to do? And again, why did this appeal to you? What drew you into what he was trying to do?
Okay, so for Kodak, what I can say is that, again, a really great company. It's an old, established company. Again, I was joining with the same logic that it's a new thing.
Yes.
I'm now going from, I've done consumer goods, I've had a brush with internet and, kind of technology business. And now I'm not going back straight into selling detergents. I've now moved to a new sector, which is imaging.
Yes.
And it has some things which are familiar to me because brand is the central thing. What are you communicating to the consumer market and everything? How are you delivering through your channels? And then from a product point of view, it was very interesting because we had devices, which were cameras.
Yes, of course.
Kodak was a market leader in cameras because we had cheap cameras like KB10 and all this stuff. And then the biggest thing was film.
Yes, of course.
Then the film needed to be processed. So we had a huge chemistry kind of operation where you go to your Kodak Express and you get the thing processed. So I found all that fascinating. I really like, learning new acronyms here and there. bringing to mind, why did you learn chemistry in school? It was to know what silver halide is and what it does when it's
Yes,
exposed to
correct.
light. You know,
I know.
it's just intellectually stimulating to learn these things
Correct.
when you're new in an organization like Kodak. But because you're enjoying what you're doing and you're kind of passionate about it, you do well. And as a byproduct, really. And so Kodak was huge, market leading in imaging, which is photography and all that sort of stuff. It made me become an enthusiast in terms of photography and all that stuff, something I enjoy to date. And then I also learned another inflection point was I'd come from Unilever by background, where it was Unilever was very good at encouraging you to develop local brands, if you local variants of things, if you wanted to, if you could convince your board to resource your idea, then you're free to do it.
Correct.
Which meant it was I think Unilever celebrated cultural diversity. Yeah, much as it was a European business, you know, it had huge business like Hindustan Lever, which to all intents and purposes was an Indian company, really, with the loose reporting to Unilever. And then from a cultural point of view, you join an American corporation with one single brand. There's no leeway to say, oh, I've got a niche here that is not well served by the Kodak brand. I'm going to have I'm going to call it this. I'm going to turn, you know, or it's a variant of Kodak and it's going to be pink instead of yellow. There's no such thing. So I got exposed to now the whole notion of global power branding and how you take that to its logical conclusion.
Fantastic.
So that was also a big learning curve for me, and then practiced it in Western Europe, which, as you say, is really a developed market.
Correct.
In terms of everything.
Correct.
So then if I fast forward, I can't fast forward, but then the reason that I left Kodak, because I was doing extremely well, was that here comes this organization. Ibrahim, I think, you know, I just mentioned his name. I just drop his name willy-nilly because I'm kind of thinking everybody knows who he is, whatever else in the world. But he's one of these iconic industry players who set up Africa's first GSM network because he believed Africans deserve technology as good as Europe. And what we called Celtel started at a time when there was this industry debate where standards were in flux. GSM was a standard adopted by Europe because it was the best standard there was at that time, digital and all that stuff. There was also flapping around other standards which were of the analog tradition. So these were still adopted by the US, you know, and the Far East had their own standard, which was Africa, as usual. We are always at the footnote. We don't know what we want. We are not even debating in the, you know, we're just not there.
We're not even at the table.
We are waiting for the crumbs to fall off the table, and then we just go along with the tide. Now, Ibrahim is from Sudan. The guy remembers, much as he had been technical director of British Telecom, a real high flyer. And then he left to set up his own consultancy, which he then sold to Marconi, and then decided to plow the proceeds from that exit into building Africa's GSM network at a time when nobody knew what GSM was. And Celtel Uganda is always playing some critical role. It's the source of the Nile and all that. But Celtel Uganda was the first GSM operation in Africa.
It was done under Ibrahim.
Yes, of course.
And that time you said it had a different name, Mobile.
Well, the was called Mobile Systems International. So I joined Mobile Systems International.
Okay.
And then we rebranded the group and everything into Celtel.
So when you joined is when literally their first network was going live. That was...
No, Uganda was already live. And then they had licenses in like 11 or so countries, in places like Burkina Faso and Chad and all these places.
Okay.
Because there's always a scramble for Africa. So there was these licenses all over the place. People were going for them, and all that stuff. And as a result, I joined at the time when, because also I think the strategy, if you ask me, was that you're going to put together this footprint and then more or less from a private equity approach, which is you've already identified that you're going to exit. So that was the strategy, let me put it that way, yeah?
Correct.
So the crew there was Mo Ibrahim, there was Moez Daya, and, if I can mention the key drivers of this thing, Moez was the chief technical officer. And so they had exited from the technology side of things, and it made sense to roll this across Africa while the majors were distracted doing other things, and then sell it to them.
Okay.
But as I said, it was a time when if you're trying to raise any money or trying to sell things, if you mention Africa, and then you mention something ending with com, after the burst of the .com hype, then you have investment bankers running down the corridor away from you, clean pair of heels, they don't want to know. Yeah. So as a result, I think MSI got saddled with all these things and they needed to run it, not just... So I joined at a time when almost every employee was either a telecom engineer or a financial engineer.
One of the two.
One of the two, because that's all you need to then exit. But here we are saying, we have to run these networks. We have to become a Vodafone or become a T-Mobile kind of thing. And so then I joined to do what I had already known how to do while I learn, get to grips again with telecoms as a technology and a way of life. But what I brought was, again, what was required, which was this interface. How do you brand this thing so that it is meaningful in the market? And how do you then distribute it? And how do you price it? And how do you explain this thing to people who are not necessarily have background knowledge of these sorts of things? And I must say that it helps if you're joining an organization where the founder has a very vivid vision and a big vision.
He knew what he wanted to do.
Yeah. He knew how he wanted to change the world. And he was passionate about it, And so the likes of us is to turn that vision into reality, or to help turn that vision into reality. And so it was a phenomenal period of my career. We were extremely successful, as you said when you were mentioning the numbers. That's where we started from, and the impact was so dramatic that we were, I used to be, before that, very proud of growing double digit. They say, we grew more than 10% or 20% or whatever. You are a hero. In fast moving consumer goods, you're growing at 10%, 20%.
That's brilliant.
That is heroic. And here we come to a situation where, irrespective of what the then consultants in the industry, they didn't give us a chance. They're saying in Africa, you'll be lucky if you grow at 5%, 10%. Those guys can't afford this thing, especially GSM. It's not affordable. How are you going to even justify putting up towers and all these capital-intensive things, right? And here we were growing at, you join, you know that minimum you grow at 100%. So it is 3-digit growth minimum. And we grew exponentially.
So tell me a little bit about the Celtel time, because I want to understand about the growth progression, and then I believe that is also because also Celtel eventually came to Kenya. I think there's even a very
Yes.
interesting story about how what I think we used to call Yes was
Oh,
acquired
yeah.
by
I remember those
There's a
days.
very interesting narrative about people in two boardrooms and somebody going back and forth, selling from Vivendi
Oh, yeah.
to Celtel, and then I think under Celtel is when the one network concept was conceived.
Yeah.
So maybe talk a little bit about that, because I think the
Okay.
growth. Yeah, how did all this come about? Yeah,
No, thanks for reminding me. Now, Celtel under Mo Ibrahim, I think we changed the face of telecoms. And I'm saying that because, great people, whether it's IEC, whether it's Mo, they're not the best people at bragging about what they do. That's why they're great people.
the
Because
focus on the work.
they're humble. They know what they're up about. They don't need external validation necessarily, right? And the problem for us, especially as Africans, is because we come from that tradition where you say, if you've done great things, let the villagers say about it. It's very bad form for you to come out like an American CEO and kind of bang
In
your
the
chest and
bravado,
say,
eh?
well, this is what I'm doing, right? It doesn't happen. The downside, in my view, is that if then the African storytellers don't step up
Yeah.
and tell this story, then as far as the world is concerned, it didn't happen. So stories like the Africa Online story, to my mind, they're not told enough. We are not inspiring people to say, guys, you can come from, wherever EC comes from. You can go to MIT and you can launch businesses at the same time as America Online or Prodigy Internet or even Amazon,
Correct.
and you can do it successfully. I don't think we tell these stories enough. So it's great that you're giving us this opportunity to reflect on these things. But let's say Celtel. So when I joined Celtel, it was at a time when there was no, or I was joining just at the time that we were grappling with issues like what is billing, because when Celtel was launched in some of these countries, there was no prepaid billing systems in those days.
It is all postpaid, yeah?
It was all postpaid. A bill is something you receive at the end of the month, and then you pay after you've used your thing, because we don't know how much you're going to use. Don't forget that the telco industry was based on whatever ITU had, because that's to be interconnected and all this. So there were global standards. And because of that, billing was well understood. You could not get a telephone to your house, telephone line, if the company felt that you're not creditworthy, that you could not
Wow.
pay at the end of the day. That's why you
Correct.
are in a place like Kenya, you probably had 100,000 fixed lines, or less, I don't know. And here we are saying we want to sell this thing as a mass market proposition. There's no credit reference bureau. Anyway, we're not going to use it. So, and the culture is it's a cash thing. I can pay for it today. I don't know if I'll pay for it. So what I consume today, I can pay for. What I consume or I can pay for. So how do you sell this service for cash up front? The industry was not dealing with those things. The guys were, and I found a thing that was curious for me coming from a non-telecom background,
Yes.
was that innovation was not done by the customer-facing networks. It was done by the vendors. So these
Oh.
were Ericsson, Nokia. Those are the guys
Okay.
who came up and says, okay, now we are moving to 2G. And then they sell
The
it to
guys providing the
deliver.
equipment and the
Yeah.
technology.
So that's how it was. Okay. So what I want to put on the table is that under Celtel, we launched the first mobile money deployment in Africa called Celpay. This was, we launched in Zambia in 2002. I think if you check carefully, you'll find that we were the second company in the whole world after the Philippines. I think the Philippines launched in 2001 and we launched in 2002. And as a precursor to even launching this thing, we launched something that is called Me2U. Yeah, Me2U is a Celtel thing. We even branded it Me2U. It exists to this day. Maybe 7 years later, Safaricom launched it locally in Kenya and called it Sambaza. But it's the same thing. Telco is an industry.
Sending airtime to other people, right?
Yeah, so sending airtime remotely, being able to top up somebody else's airtime remotely. A lot of that innovation was done by Celtel. Yeah, so I just want to make people. And then, of course, once we did it, Ibrahim was called by UNDP, he won innovation awards for this thing, it is. By the time we sold it to First Rand First Rand Bank of South Africa, we were transacting more than 10% of Zambia's GDP. We had rolled out to Gabon, we had rolled out to DRC, where the UN peacekeepers, more than 200,000 of them, were being paid using Celpay.
This is all 2002, 2003.
2002, 2003, 2004.
So let me just stop you there for a second, because the notion in the world right now, at least within East Africa, is that M-Pesa was the first mobile money payments platform. You're telling me that Celpay had a fully functioning, multi-country mobile payments platform called Celpay that was running.
Yeah, and that's it's nonsense to say that M-Pesa is the first blah, 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 because M-Pesa launched in 2007. We launched in
5 years
2002.
later. Yeah. So you were the first real use case in Africa.
M-Pesa was based on Celpay.
Ultimately.
Yeah. Not ultimately,
it was.
Yeah. All these things, how do you appoint agents? How do you...
Agent network, all that.
Agent network.
So the entire business logic.
The whole model.
You guys had perfected it.
We had done it. No, we had done it. So if people come to study it as a case study of inclusion and, they're doing it from documenting it, it's fine with us, especially given that mentality that we had, which is to say that we are not doing it because we want to be perceived to be the guys who necessarily... We are doing it as a service to the needs we've observed in the market. What was driving this thing was that every time we went out in Lusaka, it was at a time when there was hyperinflation, which means inflation was more than 100%. So if we've got to go out for dinner, you've got to carry a whole sack full of kwacha to be able to pay for the dinner, because last month you needed half the notes that you...
It's just escalating.
I was saying, how are we going to deal with this thing? There was a lot of dynamics that meant that Celpay came and met a real crucial need there, that you could now pay.
Okay. So the circumstances created
the thing, because you're saying, okay, so clearly cards would do a good job, but what's the
penetration
unbanked, and Visa and MasterCard are not interested necessarily in doing innovation for Zambia.
And the bottom of the
pyramid.
Here we are.
Yeah. So a lot of the stuff that we had been involved in previously, which is all this bottom of the pyramid stuff that I was involved in at Unilever, and my colleague, Sega Gabriels, who became Chief Business Development Officer, was actually personally, she was running that thing. She decamped from London, sat down in Lusaka, and oversaw the whole thing from scratch. Yeah. And as guys were there, we were saying, okay, how are we going to distribute it? How are we going to brand it? How are we going to make sure that people understand it for it to take off? Now, our downfall is that we don't tell these stories, We are not from that tradition of saying, wow, But in reality, that is how these things... Now, somebody might have traveled to DRC and seen this thing happening and come back to Kenya and say, hey, I've got a great idea. No. Celtel did it first.
Wow.
The same thing with One Network. So One Network came about, if we've got time for it, is to say the way the telco industry was organized under the UN's ITU was that each country had a telco with a number prefix, right?
Correct.
And now this was interconnected and all that sort of stuff. But there were very interesting things happening that were not visible to these individual country operations. Now we come in, Ibrahim has this Pan-African vision, and we happen to be operating from the Indian Ocean all the way to the Atlantic, continuously, contiguous borders. We've decided all these colonial boundaries are artificial. We're just going to connect the continent. So you've got a situation where you've got Celtel DRC, you've got Celtel Congo Brazzaville, you've got Celtel Gabon, then you've got Celtel Zambia, Zambia, Malawi, Tanzania. Yeah, all contiguous. So you can set off from Dar es Salaam and fly all the way to Pointe Noire on the Atlantic coast without leaving Celtel coverage.
They're always connected.
Yeah, but then in reality, each of these countries is operating a fully fledged operating company that complies with the local regulatory blah, blah. From a brand point of view, I'd come in and we had created this uniform Pan-African brand. The curious thing was that that when I asked the pricing director, guys at the center, who is dealing with pricing issues, and I'm wondering if someone makes a call across the river from Kinshasa.
Yes.
He's calling Brazzaville. Brazzaville is, you can see it because it's just separated by the Congo River, right? So these two capital cities. So I'm calling my cousin in Brazzaville. It's an international call.
The routing and everything, correct?
Maybe it, let's say those days international calling was very expensive. So for instance, maybe it costs $2 a minute. You're calling, making an international call. Then when you look at the pricing things and you say, okay, when we originate the call as a Celtel network, we're originating the call. The consumer is paying Celtel Kinshasa, yeah? Paying them $2. So I'm curious to find out, on the other side, for terminating the call on a Celtel network, what do we get?
Yes.
And that's where you find that for originate the call, for instance, you're getting 60 cents. On the other side, Celtel Brazzaville, you're saying, okay, so how much are we receiving for completing this call? You're getting 40 cents. So the question that we were asking is, we asked ourselves, okay, so as the guys who put up the infrastructure and everything in Africa, blah, 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 of these $2, we are receiving $1. Where is the other dollar going? So that is where the question starts. And of course, when you ask these inconvenient questions and you're not a telecom guy, people tell you, hey,
It's the way it is.
that's the way it is. You don't understand the industry.
Oh, you're the dumb one. You don't get it.
Yeah, you say, yeah, for sure we don't understand the industry. We don't understand. Where is this thing going? Oh, well, because you're not from it. There are other companies behind the scenes called international carriers. So these guys, their role is to carry traffic from Kinshasa, combine it with all sorts of things, and carry it to Europe, Brussels. From Brussels, the international carriers combine it with others in a big trunk. It goes to Paris. From Paris, it comes back down to Brazzaville. And for that reason, that's where the dollar is going. So these are very interesting things to discover. How would you discover it if you're not operating in both countries across the thing? That's one thing. It's not that everybody had problems with it, because that's the way the world was.
It was simply status quo.
But the issue was that Moez Dias, the chief technical officer, people like Omari Issa, the chief operating officer, and myself there representing the consumer, were saying, how can this thing be solved? How can this thing be solved? And that was the one network in a nutshell, to say, how do you fuse these networks? Get rid of this more than 50%, sometimes as much as 60%, is going to these international carriers. They have not invested in switches, in towers, in radio, in brand.
They're just carrying traffic.
You're just giving them,
Consolidators,
and of course, all of them were European at that time.
Wow.
So there was all this overhang that meant that Africans, much as we are saying we are the poorest, we were paying the highest prices for something that in other markets the consumer was not paying as high.
So what did you guys then decide to do?
Yeah, so as a result, we stuck, the technical guys did their bit. They stuck a microwave on one side of the river, another microwave on the other side of the river.
So they physically, literally connected the networks.
Up the network. From a marketing point of view, we just passed on the benefit to the consumer. Network traffic grew by more than 1,000%. And then we said, okay, if this happens across one border, then why don't we do the same across all these artificial boundaries we have? And that was the one network.
So you had to go to each country and get permission to connect.
Yeah, that was the other thing. That what delayed the whole thing is regulatory affairs, because you have to convince the regulators
on both sides of the pond.
Yeah, that this is a good idea. But African regulators are also very attuned to innovation. And for that, we did it. The reason I say that is because one of the first calls I got was from the European Union. Yeah, in my office, saying, the commissioners, they want to talk to you.
Uh-huh.
I'm saying, why? Okay, your offices are in Amsterdam, but we have nothing to do with Europe. It's just a head office that makes it easy to run around. It's tax efficient, all that stuff. But they were serious. They really wanted. And their curiosity was driven by the fact that they're saying, well, we noticed that you launched this one network thing. And we are interested because it is the exact thing we've been trying to push for across the European Union. We've not been able to do it. And the reason we've not been able to do it is the industry has told us that it is impossible to do.
Oh. But you guys have done it.
So I laughed. I said, ha, 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 ha. So again, you're curious to say, how have Africans managed to do it? Okay, tongue in cheek. Because you have narratives in the world where Africans believe that we cannot be the innovators. Yeah? Yet all these industry inflection points, mobile money, multi-country network, now it was us. We are saying we are stitching this thing up together into a one network for the sake of the market. And so that was a world first. And we did it under Celtel.
Do you know, at that time, I was doing a lot of work in the region, Uganda, Tanzania, and I distinctly remember the roaming moment.
Yes.
Because I was using my Celtel, and those days I don't think you had dual SIMs, you had two different phones. I had Nokia phones.
Yeah.
And I had Celtels because of the one network.
Correct.
And the cost, because I was still calling home. I'm in Tanzania, I'm in Dar es Salaam, I'm in Kampala.
Yeah.
And I was using Celtel for that reason.
Yes. It was a big deal for people who are traveling. Yeah. And don't forget that the people who have problems traveling across boundaries in Africa are those educated people with passports. Because the other guys without IDs and whatever, whose relatives are across the border. And,
wow.
They cross these borders every day.
Informally, yes.
Yeah, because that's what your ancestors have been doing. If you're a Maasai guy crossing from Tanzania,
so
where you have many relatives.
Wow.
Yeah. So are you going to be using Celtel Kenya, Celtel Tanzania, and you're crossing all the time?
Yet it's there. Well,
So that was a marvelous moment
yeah.
for us.
So I think we'll stop there for now.
Yeah, let's do it.
I believe now we have part 3 coming up, where we
you.
now get into the next steps.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for that, Tito.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
And I think
enjoyable.
the 2 instructive moments there, I think, is the one, network for me. Also understanding, what went into that, and subsequently our conversation there about Celpay, which for me is surprising because all along the narrative has been M-Pesa, and now we hear that there was something that was a precursor 5 years earlier that actually did exactly the same things.
Correct.
So thanks for that, Tito, and we'll go into part 3 shortly.
Thank you.
And yes, to our audience, as you can see, there's still more to cover. We'll now get to, the Zain moment and how he was involved in that transition at Celtel, and of course, all the way to the point in part 3 where we'll get to hear what Tito is doing right now in these areas. So thank you so much for joining us for part 2, and we look forward to catching you in part 3.